She raised her champagne glass and called me the family's most profitable tax-free investment. She thought it was a witty joke to put me in my place. But she forgot one thing. I am a senior forensic accountant in Manhattan. While she bragged about loopholes, I was holding 20 years of her buried tax fraud records. She wanted to talk about tax benefits, so I decided to give her a lesson she would never forget. My name is Jade Ellison, and I have spent the last 10 years of my life translating human behavior into spreadsheets. People lie. They lie to their spouses, they lie to their investors, and most often, they lie to themselves. But numbers do not possess the capacity for deception. A zero is always a zero. A deficit is always a deficit. In my line of work as a senior forensic accountant at Sterling and Vane Associates, I am the person they call when the numbers stop adding up. My office on the 42nd floor of a steel and glass tower in Lower Manhattan is a shrine to this philosophy. It is sterile, white, and meticulously organized. There are no personal photographs on my desk, no potted plants that require watering, and absolutely no clutter. Everything has a place, and everything is accountable. At 32 years old, I have cultivated a life that functions like a well-oiled machine. I wake up at 4:45 in the morning. I run exactly 6 miles along the Hudson River. Regardless of the weather, I drink black coffee, and I bill my clients by the 6-minute increment. My colleagues call me efficient. My father calls me cold. But I prefer the term insulated. When you grow up in a house built on quicksand, you learn to appreciate the stability of concrete. My life is small, quiet, and entirely mine. Or at least, I thought it was until the heavy cream-colored envelope arrived on my desk on a Tuesday afternoon, sliding over the polished surface like a threat. I did not need to open it to know who it was from. The calligraphy was too sweeping, the cardstock too thick. It smelled faintly of lavender and old money. It was an invitation to a birthday party. My birthday party. The invitation requested the honor of my presence at a gala celebrating the 30th birthday of Jade Ellison. I stared at the embossed gold letters. I turned 32 last month. This was not a mistake. This was Serena. My stepmother had decided that 30 was a much more marketable age for a stepdaughter she was trying to marry off or parade around as a trophy of her benevolence. To Serena, facts were merely suggestions, and the truth was something you molded to fit the aesthetic of the season. I tossed the invitation into the recycling bin and turned back to my dual monitors. I was in the middle of unraveling a complex embezzlement scheme involving a mid-sized construction firm in Jersey City, and I found the fraudulent invoices far more comforting than the thought of spending an evening with my family. My father, Robert, used to be a man of substance. He was an architect who loved the smell of sawdust and the integrity of a load-bearing wall. But that man died slowly, piece by piece, starting the day my mother passed away. My mother died when I was 12. It was ovarian cancer. Swift and brutal. She left behind a house filled with books, a garden that was always slightly overgrown, and a warmth that seemed to vanish the moment her coffin was lowered into the ground. Serena arrived 11 months later. She was 29 years old, beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, and she did not like clutter. She did not like books. She did not like overgrown gardens. Within a year of marrying my father, she had renovated our entire existence. My mother's reading nook became a yoga studio. The kitchen, once yellow and smelling of yeast, became a stainless steel operating room where caterers prepared meals that Serena pretended to cook. I learned very quickly that resistance was futile. When I cried because she threw away my mother's collection of ceramic frogs, my father told me I was being difficult. When I refused to call her mom, Serena looked at me with those wide, wet eyes and asked why I wanted to hurt the family. I learned to be quiet. I learned to hide the things I loved. I learned that if I showed no emotion, she had nothing to target. I built a wall around myself, not made of stone, but of silence and compliance. I became the perfect, invisible daughter. I went to boarding school, then university, then straight into the most demanding career I could find. I visited only on holidays, smiling politely, eating small portions, and leaving the moment the dessert forks were cleared. I thought I had escaped. I thought my silence had bought my freedom, but the phone on my desk buzzed, shattering the quiet of my office. The caller ID flashed a single word, home. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. I knew that if I let it go to voicemail, she would call the main switchboard and charm the receptionist into putting her through as an emergency. That was Serena's gift. She weaponized courtesy. "Jade, darling." Her voice purred through the receiver. It was a voice that sounded like champagne bubbles popping. "I was worried you hadn't received the invitation. The post has been so unreliable lately." "I got it, Serena," I said, keeping my eyes on the spreadsheet in front of me. "I am 32? The invitation says 30, she laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Oh, stop being so literal. 30 is such a milestone. We missed the last 2 because of your incessant working, so we are just doing a do-over. Besides, nobody wants to celebrate 32. It is such a non-event. This is going to be magnificent. Jade, we have booked the estate in the Hamptons. The senator is coming, and the darling boy from the oil conglomerate." "I can't make it," I said, my voice flat. "I have a deadline, a big case." "Jade," her tone shifted instantly. The bubbles were gone, replaced by the sharp edge of steel. "Do not do this to your father. He has been looking forward to this for months. He has been so fragile lately. His heart, you know, he talks about you all the time. He just wants to see his little girl shine." This was the hook. It was always the hook. My father was perfectly healthy, or at least he had been the last time I saw him. But Serena treated his well-being like a hostage she could execute whenever she needed compliance. "I will send a gift," I offered, knowing it wouldn't be enough. "We do not want a gift," Serena snapped, then softened her voice again, a masterclass in emotional whiplash. "We want you— Look, I know we have had our differences. I know you think I am just the wicked stepmother from the storybooks, but I have tried. Jade, I have tried so hard to build a family here. Is it too much to ask for one evening, one single evening, to show the world that we are a united front? The rumors have been awful lately. People say you are estranged. They say we cast you out. It reflects so poorly on Robert's business." There it was, the truth buried under the guilt. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about my birthday. It was about optics. It was about the crystal wall that Serena had built around our family, a transparent, glittering barrier that looked perfect from the outside, but was suffocating from within. If I didn't go, I would be the ungrateful daughter. I would be the crack in the crystal. And my father, weak and pliable as he was, would look at me with those sad, disappointed eyes that hurt more than any shouting match. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. "Fine," I said. "I will come, but I'm driving myself, and I am leaving early." "Wonderful." She was back to champagne bubbles. "Wear something stunning, not one of those drab gray suits you love so much. And Jade, try to look happy, for your father." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest. It was the sensation of being trapped, of being a prop in someone else's play. I told myself this would be the last time. I would go to this farce of a birthday party. I would smile at her fake friends. I would let her lie about my age. And then I would be done. I would formally distance myself. I would tell my father that I could no longer participate in their charade. I looked at the clock. It was 7 in the evening. Most of the office had gone home, leaving the floor in a hum of server noise and air conditioning. I needed to work. I needed the clarity of numbers to scrub the sound of Serena's voice from my head. I opened the secure portal for my personal banking. I usually checked my accounts once a week, a habit born of professional paranoia. I had a trust fund, a remnant of my mother's life insurance and my grandfather's estate, which was technically under the co-trusteeship of my father and an independent advisor until I turned 35. However, I had viewing rights. I logged in, expecting to see the usual flat lines of low-risk bonds and municipal investments. Instead, I saw a flag, a small, red notification icon next to the Recent Activity tab. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the instinct of a hunter spotting movement in the brush. I clicked on the tab. There was a transaction dated 3 days ago. A transfer of $50,000 out of the liquidity pool, labeled simply as consulting fees, JE Management. I frowned. There was no JE Management. I certainly hadn't authorized any consulting fees. I drilled down into the transaction details. The authorization code belonged to the secondary trustee. That was my father. But the IP address for the request didn't match his office or the house in Connecticut. It was routed through a generic server. But the beneficiary account code was familiar. It triggered a memory of a shell company I had seen once in a discarded pile of mail at my father's house years ago. I pulled up a separate window and ran a quick search on the beneficiary routing number. It led to a holding company registered in Delaware, which in turn was owned by an entity called Future Horizons. It was sloppy. It was amateurish. If I had been auditing this account for a client, I would have flagged it as high risk within seconds. But this was my money. This was my family. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the sharp angles of my face. $50,000 was not a small amount. But in the context of the entire trust, it was a rounding error. Most people would miss it. Most people would assume it was a management fee or a clerical error. But I was not most people. I spent my days hunting for the missing pennies that revealed the million-dollar thefts. I thought about Serena's voice on the phone. We missed the last 2 birthdays. People say we cast you out. It reflects poorly on Robert's business. Why now? Why was she so desperate for me to appear at this specific party, at this specific time, just days after a suspicious withdrawal from my trust? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. It wasn't the hurt of a neglected daughter anymore. It was the cold, hard suspicion of a forensic accountant. I looked at the invitation again, lying in the trash bin. A celebration of life. All right, Serena, I whispered to the empty office. I will come to your party. I reached into the bin and retrieved the card. I placed it on my desk, next to my keyboard. Then I opened a new file on my computer. I did not label it family. I did not label it personal. I typed in the file name, Case File 001, Investigation. I started typing, documenting the transaction, the timestamp, the IP address. I worked through the night. I didn't go for my run the next morning. By the time the sun rose over the East River, turning the gray water to gold, I had found 3 more transactions, small ones, testing the waters, $2,000 here, $5,000 there, all labeled as vague administrative costs, all authorized by my father's credentials, but bearing the digital fingerprint of someone who didn't understand that every keystroke leaves a ghost. I realized then that the party wasn't just a party, it was a distraction. Or maybe it was a victory lap. I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to the Hamptons as a daughter. I was going as an auditor. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city waking up below me. The cars looked like toys, the people like ants. From this height, everything looked orderly. But down there, in the mess of humanity, people were lying. My family was lying. My father was weak. Serena was greedy. And they had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were inviting a family member to a birthday party. They had forgotten what I did for a living. They had forgotten that I didn't just read numbers. I read the intent behind them. I went to the bathroom attached to my office and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes. Skin pale. Expression unreadable. I looked like a ghost. Good. Ghosts were excellent at haunting people. I went back to my desk, printed the transaction logs, and slid them into a manila folder. I placed the folder in my briefcase. Then I picked up the phone and dialed my father's personal cell number. It went to voicemail. This is Robert Ellison. Please leave a message. Dad, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. I got the invite. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to seeing you. We have a lot to catch up on. I hung up. The game had started. They had fired the first shot with a $50,000 theft. I would fire the last one with the truth. I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. It was time to buy a dress. Something expensive, something sharp, something that looked like armor. If Serena wanted a show, I would give her one. But the ending of this play wasn't going to be the one she had written. The drive to the Hamptons took 3 hours of stop-and-go traffic that gave me plenty of time to regret my decision. By the time I pulled my modest sedan up the winding gravel driveway, the sun had already set, and the estate was ablaze with light. It was a sprawling, modern monstrosity of glass and white stone that looked less like a home and more like an art gallery designed to intimidate visitors. I parked between a silver Bentley and a vintage Porsche, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. The dress I had bought was a deep midnight blue, structured and severe. It was not a party dress, it was a uniform. I stepped out into the salt air, hearing the dull roar of the ocean competing with the jazz music drifting from the backyard. I walked through the open front doors, bypassing the catering staff who offered me champagne flutes I did not want. The main hall opened onto a massive patio where at least 100 people were milling about. I scanned the crowd. I recognized the senator from New York, a handful of hedge fund managers whose faces were regular fixtures in the financial journals, and a few minor celebrities who were likely there just for the open bar. What I did not see was a single person who knew my middle name, my favorite color, or the fact that I was allergic to strawberries. This was not a birthday party. It was a networking event with a cake. Jade. You actually came. Serena materialized from the crowd, like a heat-seeking missile wrapped in gold sequins. She looked spectacular. I had to give her that. At 55, she had the skin of a woman 20 years younger and the energy of a nuclear reactor. She gripped my shoulders, her nails digging slightly into my skin through the fabric of my dress. "Happy birthday, darling," she said. Leaning in for an air kiss that missed my cheek by 3 inches, she pulled back, scanning me from head to toe with a critical eye. "Oh, you chose that dress. It is very professional. A bit somber for a celebration. Do not you think? But then again, you always were so serious." "It is good to see you." "Serena," I lied, my voice steady. "Where is Dad?" "Oh, he is around somewhere holding court. But come, there is someone you simply must meet. He is a senior partner at Goldman, and I told him all about your little job." She dragged me toward a heavy-set man holding a cigar. "Arthur, this is Jade, Robert's daughter, the one I told you about. She is a bookkeeper in the city." My jaw tightened. "I am a forensic accountant. Actually, I specialize in fraud detection." Serena laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Oh, Jade, do not bore Arthur with the technicalities. She counts beans, Arthur, very meticulously. We are so proud of her ability to stay focused on the small things while the adults handle the big picture." Arthur chuckled, blowing smoke past my ear. "Good for you, dear. Every firm needs someone to check the receipts." I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck, but I forced it down. This was her game. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to be the petulant child so she could play the long-suffering matriarch. I smiled, a tight, thin expression that did not reach my eyes. "Enjoy the party, Arthur." I extricated myself from Serena's grip and moved toward the bar. I needed water. I needed silence. I found my father standing near the edge of the patio, staring out at the dark ocean. He held a tumbler of scotch. The ice melted down to nothing. He looked smaller than I remembered, his tuxedo hanging slightly loose on his frame. "Hello, Dad," I said softly. He jumped, splashing a little scotch onto his hand. He turned to me, his eyes unfocused. For a second, he looked relieved. But then his gaze darted over my shoulder, scanning for Serena. When he saw the coast was clear, he offered a weak smile. "Jade, you look like your mother tonight." It was the one thing he could have said to disarm me. The anger in my chest softened, replaced by a dull ache. "How are you?" "Dad." "Really?" "I am fine. Just tired. Business is complex these days. Complicated. He took a long swallow of the watered-down scotch. Serena put a lot of work into tonight. Be nice to her. Okay. For me, she just wants us to be a family. Is that why there are strange withdrawals from my trust fund? Dad, to help us be a family. The question slipped out before I could stop it. My father froze, the color drained from his face, leaving it gray and ashen in the ambient light. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked terrified, not guilty, but scared, like a man standing on a trap door waiting for the lever to be pulled before he could answer. The music cut out. A feedback whine screeched through the speakers, followed by the tapping of a microphone. Attention, attention, everyone! Serena's voice boomed across the patio. She was standing on a small raised stage set up over the pool, bathed in a spotlight. She held a microphone in one hand and a fresh glass of champagne in the other. Her cheeks were flushed. She had been drinking. "If I could have a moment of your time," she purred. The crowd quieted down, turning their faces toward her. I stayed in the shadows next to my father, my heart hammering a warning rhythm against my ribs. As you all know, today we are celebrating a very special milestone, Serena began, her voice dripping with performative affection. Our Jade is turning 30, or is it 31? Stops counting after the first wrinkle. Does one not? A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. I stood perfectly still. But in all seriousness, Serena continued, her tone shifting to a mock confessional whisper. I remember when Robert and I first got married. It was a whirlwind. And suddenly, I was not just a wife. I was a stepmother to a teenager. It was challenging. She paused for effect, looking down at her feet as if overcome with emotion, then looked back up with a bright, glassy smile. People told me I was a saint. They asked why I would take on someone else's burden. But I looked at Robert, and I looked at the situation, and I realized something important. She giggled. It was a dark, wet sound. I realized that family is not just about blood. It is about strategy. The crowd chuckled again, unsure if this was a joke. My father gripped his glass so hard I thought it might shatter. No, really, Serena exclaimed, gesturing broadly with her free hand. We were looking at the estate planning that year, and the accountant said we needed a dependent to qualify for this marvelous loophole in the inheritance tax structure, and there was Jade, just sitting there, needing a guardian. The air in my lungs turned to ice. She was not doing this. She could not be doing this. Sss. When people ask me how I learned to love a stepchild, Serena said, leaning into the microphone, her eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto mine in the shadows. I tell them the truth. I did not do it for love. I did it for the audit protection. She threw her head back and laughed. I am kidding, but honestly, the write-off was spectacular. She was the most profitable tax-free investment this family ever made. Ladies and gentlemen, raise your glasses to Jade, our little tax shelter. To Jade. A few voices echoed, laughing. The sound of their amusement was like physical blows. They were laughing. They thought it was funny. They thought my existence, my grief, my displacement, was a punchline about tax evasion. I looked at my father. He was staring into his glass, refusing to look up. He said nothing. He did not step forward. He did not take the microphone. He stood there and let his wife reduce his daughter to a line item on a ledger. That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. I had come here looking for a father. I had found an accomplice. The spotlight swung around. Searching for me. It hit me, blinding and hot. I blinked against the glare, feeling hundreds of eyes on me. They expected me to laugh. They expected me to play along, to be the good sport, to accept my role as the prop in Serena's grand performance. I did not smile. I slowly set my water glass down on a passing waiter's tray. I straightened my spine. I looked directly at Serena on the stage. She was grinning, waiting for my submission. I let my face go completely blank. No anger, no hurt, no embarrassment, just the flat, cold neutrality of a judge reading a verdict. I held her gaze for 5 long seconds. The laughter in the crowd began to die down, replaced by an uncomfortable murmuring. Serena's smile faltered. She shifted her weight. Suddenly unsure, I did not say a word. I did not give her the satisfaction of a scene. I simply turned my back on her. I walked through the silent crowd, my heels clicking rhythmically on the stone patio. The crowd parted for me, sensing the radioactive energy radiating from my skin. I walked past my father without glancing at him. He was a ghost to me now. Jade, do not be like that. It was a joke, Serena called out from the stage, her voice shrill and desperate. I kept walking, through the house, out the front door, into the cool, dark night. I got into my car and locked the doors. The silence inside the vehicle was absolute. I did not cry. My hands were steady as I put the key in the ignition. I looked at the house one last time, glowing on the hill like a cancerous tumor. A tax shelter, I whispered to the empty car. I put the car in gear and drove away. The sadness was gone. The loneliness was gone. In their place was something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. I was a forensic accountant. They wanted to talk about taxes. Fine. I would give them an audit, and I would start by tearing that house apart, brick by golden brick. I unlocked the door to my apartment at 2 a.m. The silence that greeted me was different from the silence in the Hamptons. That silence had been filled with the suppressed noise of 100 people holding their breath. This silence was sterile. It was the silence of a vacuum. I did not turn on the main lights. I walked straight to my bedroom, unzipped the midnight blue dress, and let it pool on the floor like a shed skin. I did not hang it up. I kicked it into the corner. I scrubbed the makeup off my face with a ferocity that left my skin red and raw, washing away the mask I had worn for Serena's benefit. When I looked in the mirror, the ghost was gone. In its place was the auditor. I made a pot of black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and carried it into my home office. This was my sanctuary. 3 monitors, a high-speed secure server connection, and a shredder that I rarely used because I preferred to keep everything. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and cracked my knuckles. My hands were not shaking anymore. The cold rage that had started in the car had crystallized into a singular, razor-sharp purpose. Serena had made a fatal error. She had given me the variable I was missing: tax shelter. Criminals often confess in the form of a joke. It is a psychological release valve. They think that by laughing about their crimes, they are neutralizing the threat. Serena thought she was just being cruel. She did not realize she was handing me a roadmap. I woke up my computer and logged into the secure terminal I used for work. Technically, using company resources for personal matters was a violation of policy. Practically, I was the one who wrote the policy, and I knew exactly how to bury my tracks. I was not looking for a needle in a haystack anymore. I was looking for a specific needle that my stepmother had just told me was made of gold. I started with the basics: public records. If Serena was claiming tax benefits based on my existence, there had to be a filing entity. You cannot just write "annoying stepdaughter" on a standard 1040 form and get a deduction. To be a tax shelter, in the way she implied, there had to be a structure. I pulled up the property records for the Hamptons estate first. I wanted to verify what I had suspected in the car. The deed was not in my father's name. It was not in Serena's name. It was held by a limited liability company called Blue Horizon Properties, LLC. I traced the LLC. It was registered in Delaware, a standard move for privacy. But Delaware registries require a registered agent. I dug deeper, peeling back the corporate layers like an onion. Blue Horizon was owned by another entity, a nonprofit organization. My breath hitched. A nonprofit. The entity was listed as the Ellison Future Foundation. I stared at the name on the screen. The Ellison Future Foundation. It sounded noble. It sounded like something a philanthropist would build to leave a legacy. I checked the incorporation date. It was established 6 months after Serena married my father. I was 16 years old then. I navigated to the IRS database for tax-exempt organizations. Nonprofits are required to file Form 990, which is a public document. It lists revenue, expenses, board members, and, crucially, the mission statement. I downloaded the filings for the last 15 years. The PDF files loaded slowly, the spinning wheel on my screen mocking my patience. When the first file opened, I skipped the financial summary and went straight to the Statement of Program Service Accomplishments. There it was, typed in plain, black and white text. Mission to provide lifelong care, housing, and specialized medical support for family members suffering from severe permanent cognitive disabilities and developmental delays. I froze. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my lips. Cognitive disabilities, developmental delays. I scrolled down to the Schedule O, the supplemental information section where organizations have to list specific beneficiaries if they are disqualified persons or related to the board. Primary beneficiary Jade Ellison, condition severe nonverbal autism and cognitive impairment requiring 24-hour supervision and specialized environmental controls. The mug slipped from my fingers. It hit the desk with a heavy thud, splashing hot coffee over my keyboard, but I did not move. I did not reach for a towel. I could not breathe. I was 16 when this was filed. I was the captain of the debate team. I was taking advanced placement calculus. I was writing essays on French literature. And while I was doing that, my father and Serena were filing federal documents declaring that I was nonverbal and mentally incapacitated. They had erased me. They had replaced the real Jade Ellison, the smart, ambitious, capable girl with a ghost who needed specialized environmental controls. I clicked through the years. The narrative remained consistent. Every year, the foundation claimed millions of dollars in donations that were likely tax-deductible from my father's business income. And every year, the foundation spent nearly all of that money on care facilities and therapeutic travel. The care facility was the Hamptons house. The therapeutic travel coincided perfectly with Serena's Instagram posts from Paris, Milan, and Bora Bora. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to spin my chair away from the desk. I put my head between my knees, gasping for air. It was not just greed. Greed I understood. Greed was common. This was something else. This was a systematic dehumanization of my entire existence. They had legally defined me as broken so they could live like royalty. My father had signed these. I forced myself to turn back to the screen. I needed to see the signature. I opened the filing from 10 years ago. I scrolled to the bottom of the signature page. Robert Ellison, Trustee, Serena Ellison, Executive Director. Underneath the signatures was an attachment, a medical verification form. The IRS usually does not require this to be public, but for some reason, it had been scanned in with the rest of the return for that specific year. Perhaps due to a clerical error at the processing center, it was a letter on letterhead from a doctor, Aris Thorne. I recognized the name. He was a concierge doctor in the city, known for writing prescriptions for whatever his wealthy clients wanted. The letter stated, in clinical detail, that Jade Ellison possessed the mental capacity of a 5-year-old and would never be able to live independently. I read the date on the letter. It was dated 2 days after my high school graduation, the same day my father had hugged me and told me he was proud of my grades. He had signed this lie while my diploma was still sitting on the mantelpiece. I wiped the spilled coffee off the desk with a stack of napkins. My movements jerky and mechanical. I needed more. Public records were one thing. Internal IRS flags were another. I picked up my phone. It was 3:30 in the morning. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name David, IRSCI. David was a criminal investigations special agent I had worked with on a massive Ponzi scheme case 2 years ago. We had spent 6 months in a windowless room tracing wire transfers. He owed me. I had saved his case when the lead witness disappeared. I pressed call. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Jade, is everything okay?" "It is the middle of the night. I need a favor." "David," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, metallic. "I need you to run an EIN for me, off the books. Just a quick flag check." There was a pause. I could hear him shifting in bed, the rustle of sheets. Jade, you know I can't just run numbers without a case file. If audit trails pick it up. It is my family. David, I interrupted. Please, I just need to know if there are any active flags or if it has ever been audited. The name is the Ellison Future Foundation. The silence on the other end stretched for 10 seconds. Then I heard a sigh and the sound of a lamp clicking on. Give me the number. I read him the employer identification number from the Form 990. I heard the tapping of his keyboard. You are lucky I am on call this week and have my laptop home, he muttered. Okay, logging in. Ellison Future Foundation. 501c3. Private foundation status. He fell silent for a long minute. All I could hear was the hum of my own servers and the pounding of my heart. Jade, his voice changed. The sleepiness was gone, replaced by the sharp tone of an agent spotting a discrepancy. This entity has been flagged twice by the automated system for high administrative expense ratios, but both times the flags were manually cleared. Override code looks like, wow, that is a high-level override. What does that mean? I asked, gripping the phone tight. It means someone with juice made the audit go away, David said. But that is not the interesting part. I am looking at the cross-referencing. This EIN is linked to 3 other shell companies that are currently on a watch list for offshore tax evasion. Did you know your foundation is moving money through the Cayman Islands? I suspected, I said. David, can you see who signed the most recent tax return, the one filed this year? Hold on. Pulling the image. Okay. Form 990PF, filed. April 15th, signature block. I held my breath. Signed by Serena Ellison, David read. Title President and Chief Compliance Officer, and, wait, there is a secondary signature for the medical deduction verification. It is not your father's. Who is it? It is a power of attorney signature, David said. Signed by Serena Ellison on behalf of Jade Ellison. The room spun. She signed for me, I whispered. Yeah, it says here, Jade Ellison, incapacitated adult. By guardian Serena Ellison. Jade, are you under a guardianship? No, I said, the word coming out like a gunshot. I am a certified public accountant and a certified fraud examiner. I manage my own life. Then this is identity theft, David said, and grand larceny, and federal tax fraud. Jade, the amount they are claiming in deductions for your medical care last year, it is over $2 million. If this is fake, they are looking at 20 years in federal prison, minimum. David, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and validation. Print it. Print the return with her signature. Send it to my secure email. Do not file an official report yet. Not yet. Jade, I have a duty to report. Give me 24 hours, I pleaded. I need to build the full case. If you report it now, they will shred everything before the warrant gets signed. You know how this works. I need to secure the physical evidence. He hesitated. 24 hours. After that, I am flagging it. This is too big to sit on. Thank you. I hung up. A moment later, my email pinged. I opened the attachment. It was a tax return. Dense with numbers. I scrolled to the bottom. There was Serena's signature. Loops and swirls of blue ink. Confident and arrogant. And right below it, her signature again, signing my name as my guardian. She had stolen my voice. She had stolen my autonomy. She had told the United States government that I was a vegetable so she could buy handbags and host parties. I hit print. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life. The sound was rhythmic, almost soothing. Chug, shh, chug, shh. Page after page of evidence slid into the tray. I stood up and walked to the window. The sky was beginning to turn a bruised purple over the skyline. New York City was waking up. Millions of people were about to start their day, worrying about rent, about groceries, about being late for work. My father and Serena were probably sleeping soundly in their stolen mansion, dreaming of their tax-free millions. They thought I was just a bitter stepdaughter who had stormed off in a huff. They thought the worst thing I could do was not show up for Thanksgiving. I picked up the first page of the fresh printout. It was still warm. "You wanted a dependent," I said to the empty room. "You are going to wish you had just paid the taxes." I turned back to my computer. I had the what. Now I needed the how. I needed to track the money. If David was right about the Cayman Islands, this wasn't just tax fraud. This was money laundering. And for that, I needed more than public records. I needed to get inside the foundation's actual bank accounts. And thanks to their lie about my incapacity, I realized with a dark smile, I might just have the legal standing to demand access to the very accounts they used to imprison me. I pulled up the legal statutes regarding beneficiary rights for special needs trusts. If I was the beneficiary, I had the right to audit the books. They had built their lie so well. They had accidentally given me the key to the castle. I started a new search query. It was time to find the money. The sun had fully risen, casting a harsh, revealing light across my apartment, but I had not moved from my desk. My eyes were gritty, burning with the dry fatigue that comes from staring at backlit screens for 6 hours straight, but my mind was operating with crystalline clarity. I had the tax returns. I had the fraudulent medical diagnosis. Now, I needed to understand the mechanics of the engine. A fraud of this magnitude, sustaining a multi-million-dollar lifestyle for over a decade, does not run on simple lies. It runs on a network. I opened a new visualization software, the kind I use to map out organized crime syndicates for the district attorney's office. I placed the Ellison Future Foundation in the center. Then, I began to trace the inflow of cash. According to the filings, the foundation received 90% of its funding from 3 primary donors. On paper, these were independent corporations, Vantage Strategic Solutions, Aurora Global Holdings, and Apex Management Group. They sounded impressive. They sounded legitimate. But in my world, generic names are usually a red flag. Legitimate companies have footprints. They have LinkedIn pages, press releases, Glassdoor reviews. These 3 had nothing but Delaware incorporation papers and post office boxes in Wilmington. I pulled the incorporation documents for Aurora Global Holdings. The registered agent was a standard corporate service company, a dead end, but I dug deeper into the metadata of their annual franchise tax filings. I found a contact email address buried in the administrative contact field of a filing from 8 years ago. It was not a corporate email. It was S. Ellison, Design Mail, Com. Serena. I sat back, letting out a sharp, humorless breath. It was a classic round-tripping scheme. My father's construction company, which I knew had been profitable, was likely paying these shell companies for consulting or vendor services. Those payments were business expenses, reducing my father's taxable income. Then, the shell companies controlled by Serena donated that money to the foundation. Since the foundation was a charity, the donation was tax-exempt, but the money had to come out. A charity is not a bank vault. It is a river. The money has to flow. I shifted my focus to the foundation's expenses. This was where the audacity of the scheme turned into something grotesque. The tax returns listed millions of dollars in program service expenses. This is the category that is supposed to go toward the charitable mission in this case. My care? I pulled up the detailed general ledger I had extracted from the server by exploiting the shared family cloud credentials my father had never changed. I filtered for the largest vendors, the biggest recipient of funds, receiving nearly $30,000 a month, was a company called Coastal Care Management. I ran a property search on their business address. It was a strip mall in New Jersey that housed a nail salon and a dry cleaner. But Coastal Care was billing the foundation for specialized 24-hour residential supervision and facility maintenance. I cross-referenced the dates of the invoices with the foundation's bank statements. The checks to Coastal Care were endorsed and deposited into an account at a private bank in the Cayman Islands. But here was the catch. I recognized the routing instructions on the outgoing wire transfers from that Cayman account. I had seen them before. They were the same instructions used to pay the mortgage on the penthouse apartment my father and Serena lived in on the Upper East Side. They were paying their own mortgage with money that was supposed to be for my disability care. But the real shock, the one that made my hands go cold on the keyboard, came when I looked at the asset list. I had assumed the Hamptons estate, the sprawling, white stone mansion where Serena had humiliated me just hours ago, was their vacation home. I assumed my father had bought it with his own post-tax money. I was wrong. I pulled up the deed for the Hamptons property again. I looked at the zoning permit application filed 5 years ago. The property was not listed as a residential dwelling. It was classified as the Jade Ellison Therapeutic Rehabilitation Center. I stared at the screen, blinking slowly. The pool. That was not a pool. On the permit, it was an aquatic therapy unit. The tennis court. That was a motor skills development area. The wine cellar. I pulled up the renovation invoices. It was billed as a temperature-controlled pharmaceutical storage facility. Serena lived in a tax-free mansion because she had convinced the state of New York that the entire property was a medical facility designed to treat my non-existent severe autism. The party last night, the champagne, the guests, it had all taken place inside a fraudulent hospital built on my name. When she called me her tax shelter, she was not speaking metaphorically. I was the literal foundation of the building. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. The violation was so total, so absolute. They had not just stolen my money. They had stolen my identity to build a monument to their own greed. I continued digging. I needed to see the petty theft. The round-tripping and the real estate fraud were the felonies. But the personal expenses were the insults. I found a credit card linked to the foundation. The statement for last month alone was $25,000. There was a charge for $4,000 at Hermes in Paris. The expense justification code in the ledger was sensory integration materials. There was a charge for $12,000 at a 5-star resort in Aspen. The justification: care, respite, and training retreat. There were charges for high-end steakhouses, jewelry stores, and a plastic surgeon on Park Avenue. The surgery, a facelift Serena had gotten 2 years ago, was listed as reconstructive procedure following patient-induced trauma. She had blamed her facelift on me. She had claimed, on official financial records, that I, her violent, mentally disabled stepdaughter, had attacked her, necessitating surgery. I remembered that time. I was in Chicago, auditing a bank. I had not seen Serena for 6 months. I looked at the screen, my vision blurring slightly, not from tears, but from the sheer intensity of my focus. This was evil. There was no other word for it. It was a banality of evil that wrapped itself in cashmere and hid behind tax codes. And my father, I navigated to the folder containing the authorization letters, every single significant transfer, every mortgage payment, every fraudulent classification required a trustee signature. I pulled up a document from last year authorizing the purchase of a new transport vehicle, a Range Rover that I knew Serena drove. There was my father's signature, Robert Ellison. It was shaky. The loop of the R was trailing off. Unlike his firm, architectural signature from my childhood. I zoomed in. I was a forensic expert. Handwriting analysis was part of the training. The pressure points were uneven. The flow was hesitant. This was not a forged signature, but it was not a confident one either. It was the signature of a man who was signing things he did not read. Or perhaps a man who was being guided. I found a power of attorney document in the legal subfolder. It granted Serena Ellison full and durable power to manage the assets of the Ellison Future Foundation and the personal estate of Robert Ellison due to declining health and executive fatigue. It was dated 3 years ago. Executive fatigue, I whispered. That was not a medical term. That was Serena speak for, he is tired of fighting me. My father had surrendered. He had handed her the keys to the kingdom, and by extension, the keys to my life. He might not have known she was buying Hermes bags with sensory integration money. But he knew the foundation existed. He knew I was not disabled. He knew the house was a lie. His ignorance of the details did not absolve him of the architecture of the crime. He was the architect who had walked away from the building while it was still under construction, letting the arsonist move in. I checked the time. It was now 8 in the morning. The city outside was fully awake. I had enough. I had the shell companies, the money laundering route through the Caymans, the property fraud, and the embezzlement of charitable funds. I had a case that would not just result in fines, it would result in federal prison time. Racketeering, wire fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a military-grade encrypted hard drive. It was a small, heavy rectangle of black metal. I plugged it in. I initiated a full mirror copy of the evidence folder. The progress bar crawled across the screen, copying 1,240 files, while the data transferred. I printed the most damning documents: the deed to the rehab center, the Hermes receipt, the patient-induced trauma medical claim. I organized them into a binder. This was my insurance. If they tried to lock me out of the cloud, if they tried to wipe the servers, I held the physical proof. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against the wood. I looked at the screen, a text message from Serena. I picked it up, my fingers cold. Serena. Jade, darling, I hope you are not still upset about last night. You know how your father loves a good roast. We were just having fun. Don't be dramatic. Call me when you calm down. We need to discuss your trust fund disbursement for the year. I stared at the words. Don't be dramatic, just having fun. She was probing. She was checking to see if the tax shelter comment had actually landed, or if I was just being my usual difficult self. And the mention of the trust fund disbursement, that was the bait. She was dangling money to bring me back in line, to make sure I stayed the obedient, dependent variable in her equation. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea that I was currently staring at a digital paper trail that proved she was a felon. I did not reply. I placed the phone face down. The progress bar on my screen hit 100%. Backup complete. I ejected the drive and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon. I stood up and walked to the window. The fatigue was gone. I felt a strange, vibrating energy in my limbs. It was the feeling of total control. For 20 years. Serena had controlled the narrative. She had told the world I was broken, disabled, a burden. She had used my name to build her empire. But she had forgotten the first rule of accounting. Eventually, the books have to balance. I looked at the binder on my desk. I looked at the black screen of my phone, where her manipulative text waited for an answer. I am not upset, Serena, I said to the silence of my apartment, my voice calm and terrifyingly steady. And I am not dramatic. I am accurate. I grabbed my coat. I had a meeting to prepare for, not with Serena, and not with my father. I needed to solidify the trap. She wanted to discuss my trust fund. Perfect. I would give her a discussion she would never recover from. But first, I had to make sure that when the steel jaws of this trap snapped shut, there was absolutely no way for her to gnaw her leg off and escape. I stared at the blinking cursor on my phone screen. The text message from Serena was still there, glowing with false concern. Don't be dramatic. It was a command wrapped in a dismissal. She expected me to sulk. She expected me to do what I had always done, retreat into silence and let her rewrite history. But I was not that girl anymore. I was an investigator. And an investigator knows that to catch a predator, you do not run away, you play dead. You make yourself look like an easy meal. I typed my response slowly, choosing every word with the precision of a surgeon. I am sorry. Serena, you are right. I was just stressed. Work has been awful lately, and I think I projected that onto you. Can we meet for lunch? I really need to talk to someone. I hit send. The reply came in less than 30 seconds. Of course. Darling, Le Cuckoo, 12:30. I will clear my schedule. She took the bait. The speed of her response told me everything. She was eager to solidify her control, to smooth over the cracks before my father started asking questions. She wanted to pet the dog she had kicked, just to make sure it would not bite. I arrived at the restaurant at 12:15. I wore a beige cardigan and minimal makeup. I left my sharp, structured blazer at home. I needed to look softer. I needed to look tired. I needed to look like a woman who was failing. Serena arrived at 12:40. Being 10 minutes late was her power move. It forced you to wait, to check your watch, to feel grateful when she finally appeared. She swept into the dining room wearing a white silk suit that cost more than my first car. She looked radiant, the picture of a benevolent matriarch. "Jade," she exclaimed, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of jasmine and expensive dishonesty. "Oh, look at you. You look exhausted. Have you been eating?" "I have been busy," I mumbled, keeping my eyes downcast. "Work is complicated." We sat. She ordered a bottle of Sancerre without asking me. She ordered the tasting menu for both of us. She took charge of the space, the conversation, the air in the room. "So," she said, leaning forward and resting her chin on her manicured hand, "tell me, what is going on? You stormed out of the party like a teenager. Your father was heartbroken." "I know," I said, putting a tremor in my voice. "I feel terrible about that. It is just, I am in trouble. Serena." Her eyes sharpened. The concern on her face remained fixed, but the glint in her eyes was pure curiosity. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" I took a sip of water, my hand shaking slightly. It was a calculated performance. I made a mistake at the firm, a big one. I missed a compliance filing for a client. My bonus was revoked, and my rent has gone up nearly 20%. I am drowning. Serena, I have maxed out my credit cards just to keep up appearances." I watched her face. For a split second, a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth before she smoothed it away. She liked this. She loved this. The competent, independent Jade was failing. The stepdaughter who thought she was so smart was actually a disaster. This fit her narrative perfectly. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. "I told your father that city life was too expensive for a single income. You know, there is no shame in admitting you are over your head." "I know," I whispered. I do not want to ask Dad for money. He has done so much already. And after what you said at the party, about the tax benefits, I just felt like a burden." "Oh, hush," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "That was a joke, Jade, a bad joke. But listen to me. You are family. We do not let family drown." She reached into her oversized Hermes bag, the one bought with funds from the foundation, and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. "It is funny you called," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was actually going to bring this up to you next week. Your father and I have been worried about your financial stability. We want to help. We want to set up a disbursement for you. A significant one, enough to clear your debts, and maybe even a down payment on a condo." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face filled with pathetic hope. "Really?" "Yes," she said, sliding the envelope across the white tablecloth. "But you know how lawyers are. They make everything complicated. Since the money is coming from the family trust structures, we need to restructure a few things, just to make the cash flow legal. It is all terribly boring. But if you sign this, we can wire you $50,000 by tomorrow morning." $50,000. The exact amount I had seen transferred out of my trust 3 days ago. She was offering me my own stolen money as a gift. I reached for the envelope. "What is it?" "Just a standard restructuring agreement," she said, taking a sip of wine. "It basically consolidates the old accounts your mother left, which are performing terribly, by the way, and moves them under the main family umbrella where I can manage them properly. It just simplifies everything." I opened the envelope. Inside was a 10-page document stapled at the corner. The title read, "Irrevocable Trust Modification and Asset Consolidation Agreement." I scanned the first page. It looked standard, lots of legal jargon about efficiency and management. But I was not a layman. I was a forensic accountant. I knew that in contracts, the devil is not in the details. The devil is in the definitions. I turned to page 4. Assignment of rights. I read the paragraph quickly, my eyes darting over the text. The beneficiary. Jade Ellison hereby voluntarily assigns, transfers, and conveys all current and future interests, rights, and titles in the Ellison Family Trust and the Elizabeth Ellison estate to the trustee Serena Ellison for the purpose of centralized management. She was not consolidating accounts. She was asking me to sign over my inheritance, all of it, the money my mother left me, the grandfather's bonds, everything, but it was page 7 that made my blood run cold. Release of liability and indemnification. The beneficiary acknowledges that the trustee has acted in good faith regarding all prior management of the trust and related entities, including the Ellison Future Foundation. The beneficiary hereby waives any and all claims, known or unknown, regarding past financial decisions, tax filings, or asset allocations, and agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the trustee from any future legal action regarding said management. This was it. This was the trap. Serena knew. Somewhere, deep down, she knew she was exposed. Maybe she did not know I had seen the tax returns, but she knew her house of cards was shaky. She was trying to get me to sign a document that not only stole the rest of my money, but also retroactively legalized every crime she had committed for the last 15 years. If I signed this, I could never sue her. I could never report her to the IRS. I would be legally declaring that I approved of her fraud. I looked up at her. She was smiling, watching me read. It was the smile of a spider watching a fly land on the web. It is a lot of legalese, she laughed lightly. My lawyer is so dramatic. Basically, it just says I will handle the boring investment stuff, and you get the cash. Win-win. I needed her to say it. I needed her to confirm the intent. I reached into my purse, ostensibly searching for a pen. My hand brushed against my phone. I pressed the shortcut button on the side that activated the voice recorder. I placed the phone face down on the table, right next to the breadbasket. It seems comprehensive, I said, acting hesitant. But Serena, does Dad know about this specific clause? The one about waiving all claims? It seems like I'm giving up a lot of oversight. Serena sighed, an exasperated puff of air. Jade, honey, look at me. Your father is a wonderful man. He is a genius with architecture, but money. He gets a headache balancing his checkbook. He does not understand these financial instruments. So he has not read this, I asked, widening my eyes. He trusts me, Serena said sharply. He knows I handle the money. If I showed him this, he would just be confused. He signed the authorization for me to present it to you because he wants you to be taken care of. Do not burden him with this technical nonsense. He is fragile right now. I see, I said. So, he lets you handle everything. Even the foundation filings. Everything, she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. I built that foundation. I grew the assets. Your father just signs where I tell him to sign. And frankly, you should be grateful. Without my management, there would be no money left to give you. I felt a cold thrill of victory. He just signs where I tell him to sign. She had just admitted to undue influence and manipulation. She had admitted that my father was a passive participant, a puppet. And this $50,000, I said, touching the paper. It comes from the foundation. Technically, she said, lowering her voice, we count it as a grant, a hardship grant. That way it is tax-free for you. See, I'm always thinking about your best interests. A hardship grant, using charitable funds to pay off a family member to sign away their legal rights. It was bribery using stolen money. It was brilliant. In a twisted, criminal way. I picked up the document. I did not sign it. I folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I need to read it over properly, I said, putting the envelope in my bag. My eyes are blurring from stress. I will take it home tonight, look it over, and sign it in the morning. Is that okay? Serena's smile faltered. The spider did not like it when the fly moved. Jade, she said, her voice hardening. It is standard. You can sign it right now. The notary is actually waiting in the lobby. I arranged it to save you time." She had a notary waiting. She was desperate. "I can't focus right now," I lied, pressing a hand to my temple. "I have a migraine coming on. The stress. You know I promise. Serena, first thing tomorrow. I really need that money." I leaned on the desperation. I reminded her that I was the one in need. She studied my face for a long moment. She was looking for the crack, for the lie, but I gave her nothing but exhaustion and gratitude. "Fine," she snapped, picking up her wineglass. "But do not take too long. The wire transfer window closes at noon tomorrow. If you miss it, you might have to wait another month." "I won't miss it," I said. "Thank you. Serena, you are saving me." "I usually am," she said, signaling the waiter for the check. "Honestly, Jade, I do not know what you would do without me." I watched her pay the bill with a black credit card. I caught a glimpse of the logo. It was a corporate card, the Ellison Future Foundation. She was paying for our $200 lunch with money meant for disabled care. While trying to trick me into signing away my rights, we parted ways on the sidewalk. She kissed my cheek again, that same airy, meaningless gesture. "Get some rest," she said. "You look terrible." "I will," I said. "Bye, Serena." I watched her get into a black town car that was idling at the curb. As soon as the door closed and the car pulled away, I dropped the act. My posture straightened. The exhaustion vanished from my face. I pulled my phone out of my bag and stopped the recording. Saved audio file 003. I hailed a taxi. "Downtown," I told the driver. "Financial district." I sat in the back of the cab, clutching the envelope. I did not go home. I went to a building 3 blocks from my own office. It was a firm I had gone up against in court once. They were sharks, vicious, expensive, and utterly brilliant at trust litigation. I did not need a family lawyer. Family lawyers want mediation. They want everyone to hug and make up. I needed a litigator. I needed someone who looked at a trust fund and saw a battlefield. I walked into the lobby of Kensington Pierce and asked for the senior partner. A woman named Eleanor Vance. I did not have an appointment, but I had something better. I handed the receptionist my business card, Jade Ellison, certified fraud examiner, and the envelope Serena had given me. "Tell Ms. Vance that I have a case involving a fraudulent 501c3, an offshore money laundering scheme, and a coercion attempt involving a multi-million-dollar trust," I said calmly. "And tell her I have the perpetrator on tape admitting to undue influence." The receptionist looked at me, then at the envelope. She picked up the phone immediately. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a corner office overlooking the harbor. Eleanor Vance was a woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She did not offer me coffee. She sat behind her desk, reading the document I had given her. The silence in the room was heavy. She turned page 4, then page 7. She stopped at the indemnification clause. She read it twice, then she looked up at me over her reading glasses. "This is not a restructuring agreement," she said, her voice dry and precise. "This is a confession." "I know," I said. "If you had signed this," she continued, tapping a manicured fingernail on the paper, "you would have effectively become an accessory to whatever fraud they are hiding. It attempts to bind you to their past actions." "I recorded the meeting," I said. She admitted my father signs whatever she puts in front of him. She admitted the $50,000 was a grant from the foundation to solve my personal debts. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a general who has just been handed the enemy's battle plans. "Ms. Ellison," she said, "how much damage do you want to do?" I looked at the document on her desk. I thought about the rehab center in the Hamptons. I thought about the specialized environmental controls that were actually Hermes bags. I thought about my father, drinking his scotch, looking away while his wife called me a tax shelter. "I do not want a settlement," I said. "I want a dismantling. I want the foundation dissolved. I want the assets seized, and I want Serena left with nothing but the clothes on her back." Eleanor nodded. She opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Then let's get to work," she said. "We have a very busy afternoon ahead of us." I sat forward. The game of cat and mouse was over. Now we were hunting, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the prey, I was the one holding the spear. The office of Ellison Architects was located in a pre-war building in Midtown, the kind with brass elevators and marble floors that had been worn down by decades of footsteps. I had not visited in over a year. When I pushed open the heavy oak doors, the smell hit me instantly, a mixture of cedar, graphite, and stale coffee. It was the scent of my childhood, the smell of the man I used to worship. Now, it just smelled like stagnation. The receptionist, a woman named Martha, who had worked there since I was in diapers, looked up from her computer. Her eyes widened behind her glasses. "Jade," she asked, her voice wavering, "is everything all right? Your father is in a meeting. He will want to see me." "Martha," I said, walking past her desk without stopping. "It is about the family taxes." I did not wait for her to buzz him. I walked down the hallway lined with framed blueprints of buildings my father had designed in his prime libraries. Museums, custom homes, they were monuments to his talent. I wondered how many of them had been paid for with money laundered through my name. I reached the double doors at the end of the hall and opened them. My father was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at a set of plans spread out before him. He looked up, startled, his glasses slipping down his nose. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes were deep purple, and his skin had a gray, papery quality. For a second, pity flared in my chest. He looked like a man being eaten alive from the inside. "Jade," he said, half rising from his chair. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay? Serena told me you were having lunch with her." "We did," I said. Closing the door behind me, the latch clicked with a finality that echoed in the large room. "Sit down, Dad." He sank back into his chair, looking confused. "You look intense. Honey, is this about the money Serena said she was working on a disbursement for you? She wants to help." "Stop," I said. The word came out softer than I intended, but it carried enough weight to silence him. I walked over to the chair opposite his desk and sat down. I did not have the massive binder of evidence with me. I had left that with Eleanor Vance. I had brought only one piece of paper, a single sheet, folded in thirds, resting in my purse. "I need to ask you a question, Dad," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I need you to answer me as my father, not as Serena's husband. Can you do that?" He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie. "Of course. What is this about?" "When I was 17, I began, watching his eyes. You signed a document regarding my health. Do you remember that?" He frowned. "Your health. You were always healthy, a bit skinny, maybe, but healthy." "I am talking about the document you filed with the IRS," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the paper. I unfolded it and slid it across the mahogany surface. It was the medical verification form attached to the tax return from 15 years ago. The one where you certified that I had severe cognitive disabilities and required 24-hour supervision. My father stared at the paper. He did not touch it. He did not pick it up. He just stared at it as if it were a poisonous snake that had slithered onto his desk. The silence in the room stretched thin. Vibrating with tension, I heard the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Tick, tock, tick, tock. "Dad," I prompted. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. He looked up at me, and the expression in his eyes broke my heart. It was not confusion. It was not outrage. It was terror. "It was a difficult time," he whispered. I felt the air leave my lungs. I had expected him to deny it. I had expected him to say it was a mistake, a forgery, that Serena had tricked him. But he didn't. He went straight to the justification. "A difficult time," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "I was captain of the debate team. Dad, I was applying to Ivy League schools, and you told the government I had the mental capacity of a toddler. The firm was going under, he burst out, his voice cracking. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes frantically. You do not understand. Jade, the recession hit us hard. Clients were pulling out. The banks were calling in loans. We were going to lose the house. We were going to lose everything. So you sold me, I asked. You sold my identity for a tax break. Serena said it was just paperwork, he pleaded, leaning across the desk. She said nobody would ever see it. She said it was a technical classification, a way to protect assets in a trust for you. She said it was the only way to save the company so I could leave something for you when I died. She lied, Dad, I said coldly. She did not do it to save the company. She did it to buy handbags. She did it to buy the Hamptons house. He flinched. The house is an investment. The house is a registered rehab facility, I corrected him. Did you know that when we go there for summer weekends, we are technically patients in a clinic? He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. I knew there were complexities. Serena handles the details. I just wanted to keep the peace. I just wanted to provide for you. Provide for me. I laughed. A harsh, brittle sound. You erased me. Do you know what happens if I want to adopt a child one day? Or get a security clearance? This is on my permanent record. Dad, you declared me incompetent. We can fix it, he said quickly, grasping at straws. We can amend the filings. I will talk to Serena. She will know what to do. Serena is the one who did this. I slammed my hand on the desk. She is not fixing it. She is exploiting it. Dad, look at me. She is stealing. It is not just tax evasion. She is funneling money out of the foundation into shell companies. She is laundering money, and you are the trustee. You signed the checks. His face went gray. Laundering? No. Serena wouldn't. She likes nice things. Yes, but she wouldn't do anything criminal. She is doing it right now, I said. I have the bank records. I have the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Dad, she is going to prison. And if you do not wake up, you are going with her. I watched the realization wash over him. I waited for the anger. I waited for the protective father to emerge, the man who would be furious that his wife had manipulated him and endangered his daughter. But that man did not exist. Instead, my father slumped in his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. Jade, he said, his voice trembling. You have to stop digging. I stared at him. Excuse me. You have to stop, he said, looking at me with pleading eyes. If this comes out, the scandal, my clients, the reputation of this firm, it would destroy us. We would be ruined. You are worried about your reputation, I asked, incredulous. Dad, she committed felonies in my name. She did it for us, he insisted, his voice rising in a pathetic whine. She kept this family afloat. Maybe she cut some corners. Maybe she went too far. But she is my wife. Jade, I cannot let her go to jail. It would kill her. She is not built for that. And what about me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Am I built for it? Was I built to be humiliated, to be called a tax shelter in front of 100 people? She was drunk, he dismissed, waving a hand. She did not mean it. Look, Jade, listen to me. He opened his desk drawer. He pulled out a checkbook. I know you are angry, he said, clicking a pen. You have every right to be, but we can handle this inside the family. We do not need lawyers. We do not need the IRS. He began to write. I have some personal savings, he said, not meeting my eyes. Outside the trust, I was saving it for retirement. But I can buy you a place. That condo in Tribeca you always liked, the one with the view, I can put a down payment on it today, or I can buy it outright. Whatever you want. He tore the check out of the book. He slid it across the desk, right next to the fraudulent medical form. Just let it go, he whispered. Please, Jade, for me, just burn that paper and take the check. I looked at the check. It was blank. He had signed it, but left the amount empty. A blank check to buy my silence. A blank check to buy my dignity. I looked at his face. He looked hopeful. He actually thought this would work. He thought that because Serena could be bought with money, I could be too. He thought that money was the only language anyone spoke. Something inside me severed. It was a physical sensation, like a cable snapping under tension. It was the last tie binding me to him. I realized then that I had been grieving my mother for 20 years, but I should have been grieving my father too. The man I loved had died a long time ago. This man sitting in front of me was just a shell, filled with fear and cowardice. He did not love me. He loved the idea of me. He loved me as long as I was convenient, quiet, and willing to be a prop in his life, but the moment I demanded truth, I became a threat, and he was willing to pay to make the threat go away. I reached out and picked up the check. His shoulders relaxed. He let out a long breath. Thank you, honey. I knew you would be reasonable. We can put this all behind us. Slowly, deliberately, I ripped the check in half, then I ripped it again, and again. I let the pieces flutter down onto the mahogany desk like confetti. I do not want your money, Dad, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I have my own, and unlike yours, mine is clean. I stood up. My legs felt strong. Jade, wait, he stammered, standing up too. You do not understand what you are doing. If you report this, you are declaring war on your own family. No, Dad, I said, looking him in the eye. You declared war when you signed that paper 15 years ago. You declared war when you let your wife mock me at my birthday party. I am just finishing it. She will destroy you, he warned, his voice turning nasty, the fear curdling into aggression. Serena knows people. She has lawyers. You are just one girl against a machine. I am not just one girl, I said. I am the evidence. I walked to the door and rested my hand on the brass knob, the metal cool against my palm. Jade, he called, the edge of panic returning. If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. You're making your choice. You won't have a father. I looked at him one last time. He seemed smaller than I remembered, alone in a room full of things that no longer felt certain, uneasy in the brightness. I haven't felt like I had a father since I was 12. I said quietly, "Goodbye, Robert." I stepped out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, letting it fall into place with a soft click. I walked past Martha, who kept her eyes forward, pretending she hadn't heard. I walked past the framed blueprints of the buildings my father had designed. They looked different to me now, not like triumphs, not like monuments, but like outlines of a life that had asked too much. I stepped onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk. The city rose to meet me, sirens in the distance, horns, the hum of voices, the shuffle of hurried feet. It was messy and loud, and for the first time in a long time, it sounded like freedom. It was the sound of reality. I took a deep breath of the exhaust-filled air. My chest hurt, a dull ache where my heart used to be, but beneath the pain, there was clarity. He had chosen his side. He had chosen the lie. I pulled out my phone and dialed Eleanor Vance's number. "It is done," I said when she answered. "He tried to bribe me." "I am sorry, Jade," Eleanor said softly. She understood. She knew that getting the evidence was the easy part. Accepting the betrayal was the war. "Do not be," I said. "It just makes the next part easier. Proceed with the filing, and Eleanor, add his name to the complaint. He is not a victim. He is a co-conspirator." "Understood," she said. "We will have everything ready for the gala." I hung up and started walking. I had no father, no mother, and no family home. I was an orphan in a city of 8 million people. But as I merged into the crowd, walking with a fast, determined rhythm, I realized I wasn't alone. I had the truth. And in a few days, everyone else would have it too. The fallout from my meeting with my father was immediate, but it did not manifest in screaming phone calls or angry texts. It manifested in data. I had expected this. My father was a man who crumbled under pressure, and the moment I walked out of his office, he would have called Serena. He would have told her everything that I knew about the medical forms, that I had seen the tax returns, and that I had refused the bribe, and Serena, being a creature of survival, would do exactly what a cornered animal does. She would try to bury the evidence. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my third monitor, when the alert flashed red at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Unauthorized access attempt, server node 4. I smiled. It was a cold, humorless expression. 2 days ago, anticipating a move like this, I had installed a passive monitoring script on the family trust's shared server. As a beneficiary, I had legal administrative rights to the portal, which meant my surveillance was entirely lawful. I wasn't hacking. I was simply watching the security cameras of a house I technically owned. I opened the log window. The user was logged in as Robert Ellison, admin, but the keystroke cadence was wrong. My father typed with 2 fingers. A slow, hunting peck. This user was typing at 80 words per minute. It was Serena. I watched in real time as she navigated through the digital architecture of our family's finances. She went straight for the folder labeled Historical Medical Records. She selected the files from 15 years ago, the ones confirming my disability, and hit delete. On her screen, the files vanished. She probably let out a sigh of relief, thinking she had scrubbed the past, but on my screen, the script simply archived the action. File JE_medical_2011.pdf, moved to secure quarantine. She wasn't deleting anything, she was just moving the evidence into a folder she couldn't see, time-stamping her own guilt in the process. Then came the panic moves. She switched to the banking portal. I leaned closer to the screen. She was initiating a wire transfer. The amount made my eyebrows rise. $4 million. She was draining the primary operating account of the foundation. The destination was a bank in the Cayman Islands, the same one I had identified earlier. Go ahead, Serena, I whispered. Dig the hole deeper. She authorized the transfer. Then she initiated another one. $2 million from my father's personal liquidity account. She was cashing out. She was preparing to run. I captured every packet of data. The IP address, the MAC address of the device which identified it as an iPad Pro registered to Serena Ellison, and the exact time of the transaction. This was no longer just fraud. This was active flight preparation and spoliation of evidence. I saved the logs to my encrypted drive. The digital trap had snapped shut. Now, I needed to weaponize it. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had been saving for a career-defining moment. Julian Cross, a voice answered on the second ring. It was deep, scratchy. The voice of a man who smoked too much and asked too many dangerous questions. Julian was an investigative journalist for the New York Chronicle, famous for exposing the pension fund scandal 3 years ago. Julian, I said. This is Jade Ellison. We met at the Forensic Audit Conference last year. I remember, he said. The woman who found the missing $12 million in the construction kickback scheme. What can I do for you? Jade. You sound like you have a lead. I do not have a lead, I said. I have the whole story. I have a 501c3 being used for money laundering, tax evasion, and identity theft involving a false medical diagnosis of a minor. The total fraud is estimated at over $20 million. There was a silence on the other end, then the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. I am listening. I have the tax returns, I continued. I have the property deeds. I have the wire transfer logs to the Caymans happening right now, and I have the confession. Who is the target? The Ellison Future Foundation, I said. And Serena Ellison. Your stepmother. My target, I corrected. We met an hour later at a dingy diner in Hell's Kitchen, a place where the coffee tasted like battery acid and nobody looked at your laptop screen. I handed Julian a copy of the hard drive. We spent 2 hours going through the files. I watched his expression shift from skepticism to shock. And finally, to the predatory focus of a journalist who knows he just won a Pulitzer. Julian shook his head, looking at the rehab center permit for the Hamptons house. This is insane. They turned a mansion into a hospital on paper, and nobody checked. They paid off the inspector, I said, pointing to a recurring consulting fee in the ledger. See this line item, compliance consulting. That is the bribe, Julian whistled. And the medical records, they really declared you incompetent. For 15 years, I said. I am legally a vegetable in the eyes of the IRS. Jade, he said, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and horror. This is going to burn down the entire Upper East Side. When this breaks, the donors, the politicians who attended their parties, everyone goes down. Good, I said. Burn it all. I can have the exposé ready in 48 hours, Julian said. We need to verify the Cayman accounts with a local source, but the paper trail here is bulletproof. Wait until the weekend, I said. I need you to hold the story until Saturday night. Why Saturday? Because, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. That is the night of the Golden Heart Gala. I left Julian and went straight to Eleanor Vance's office. The lights were still on. My legal team was working overtime. Eleanor looked up as I entered, her desk covered in draft filings. We are ready, she said without preamble. The complaint for the FBI is drafted. Racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy, the whistleblower submission for the IRS is also complete. We are just waiting for your signal to file. Serena is moving money, I told her. $6 million went to the Caymans today. Eleanor nodded grimly. We can get an emergency freeze order, but it might tip her off too early. If we wait, we catch her with the money in transit. It makes the intent to flee undeniable. We wait, I said. She thinks she is safe. She thinks she scrubbed the server. Let her feel secure for 2 more days. As if summoned by my thoughts. My phone buzzed. An email notification. Subject urgent, Golden Heart Gala, a special honor. From Serena Ellison. I opened it. The text was a masterpiece of gaslighting. Dearest Jade, I know things have been tense, and your father told me about your little outburst at his office. We are all under so much stress, but I have been thinking, we need to bridge this gap. We need to show the world and ourselves that we are a united family. For the gala this Saturday, I have decided to do something special. I want to announce you as the new honorary director of the Ellison Future Foundation. It is time you took your rightful place in the legacy. No responsibilities, just the title and the prestige. It will be a symbol of our trust in you. Please say you will come. I want you to give a speech, a thank you speech. For everything we have done for you, love, Serena. I handed the phone to Eleanor. She read it and laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Honorary director, she said. She is trying to pin it on you. Exactly, I said. She knows the ship is sinking. She knows the audit is coming eventually. If she names me director now, she can claim that I was involved in the decision-making. She can claim that the tax shelter comment was actually a reference to my own financial strategies. She wants to set me up as the fall guy. It was the glass cliff strategy. When a company is about to crash, put a woman in charge so she takes the blame. Serena was trying to hand me the captain's wheel of the Titanic after she had already steered it into the iceberg. She wants a speech, I said, taking the phone back. She wants me to stand up in front of 500 witnesses and thank her for her generosity. If you accept the title, Eleanor warned, it could complicate things, even if it is a sham. I am not going to accept the title, I said. I am going to accept the microphone. I typed my reply to Serena. Serena, I am touched. I did not realize you thought I was ready for such a role. I would be honored to attend and speak. I have so much I want to say to the donors. I will see you Saturday. The trap was set. Serena thought she was luring me into a legal ambush where I would become the scapegoat. She thought she was consolidating her control one last time before fleeing to the Caymans with her millions. She thought I was the stupid, compliant stepdaughter who could be bought with a fancy title. She had no idea that the honorary director was bringing the FBI as her +1. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. I worked with Julian to finalize the article. We timed the digital release to coincide exactly with the start of my speech. I worked with Eleanor to coordinate with the federal agents. Because of the scale of the fraud and the flight risk, the FBI agreed to execute the arrest warrants at the gala itself. It was theatrical, yes, but necessary. They needed to secure the physical assets before Serena could run. On the morning of the gala, I went to the salon. I cut my hair. I chopped off the long, sensible ponytail I had worn for years into a sharp, angled bob. I painted my nails a dark, blood red. I put on the white suit I had bought, not a dress. A suit. It was tailored, sharp, and intimidating. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like a victim. I did not look like a dependent. I looked like an executioner. My father sent me one last text message an hour before the event. Please, Jade, just play along tonight, for the family. I looked at the message and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the cold indifference of a number that has been balanced out of the equation. I am playing along, Dad, I said to the empty room. I am playing the game exactly the way you taught me. The only difference is, I finally learned the rules. I grabbed my clutch. Inside was not a lipstick or a compact, but a USB drive containing the visual presentation I had prepared for the gala's projection system. Serena wanted a show. She wanted a heartfelt tribute. I walked out the door. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. It was a beautiful night for a takedown. The Golden Heart Gala was about to become the scene of a massacre, and I was bringing the ammunition. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel smelled of lilies and old money. It was a scent I knew well, a cloying mixture of expensive perfume, hairspray, and the metallic tang of chilled champagne. 500 guests filled the room, a sea of black tuxedos and glittering designer gowns. They were the elite of New York senators, hedge fund managers, socialites, and the kind of people who donated 6 figures to charity just to see their names carved into granite. I stood at the top of the marble staircase, looking down at them. I was not wearing a gown. In a room full of silk and chiffon, my white tailored suit was a blade of light. It was sharp, architectural, and aggressively modern. I had cut my hair into a severe bob that framed my face like a helmet. I did not look like a debutante or a dutiful daughter. I looked like what I was, a forensic accountant arriving at a crime scene. Jade, you look different. I turned to see my father standing near the entrance to the ballroom. He held a glass of scotch with a white-knuckled grip. He looked terrible. His skin was the color of wet ash, and his tuxedo hung loosely on his frame, as if he had shrunk inside it since our meeting 2 days ago. He was sweating, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice cool and detached. He scanned my face, searching for a trace of the little girl he used to know, or perhaps the desperate woman he had tried to bribe. He found neither. "Are you going to do it?" he whispered, leaning in close so the nearby doorman wouldn't hear. "Are you going to ruin us?" "I am attending a party, Dad," I said, adjusting the cuff of my blazer. "Serena invited me. She wants to give me an honor. It would be rude to refuse." "Jade, please," he begged, a desperate rasp in his throat. "Just take the title. Smile. We can work this out later. She is on the edge. If you push her tonight, I do not know what she will do." "She is not on the edge," I said, looking past him to where Serena was holding court near the center of the room. "She is in the end zone. She thinks she has already won." I walked past him. He did not try to stop me. He never did. I moved through the crowd. The air felt thick, charged with the electricity of a coming storm. I saw Julian Cross, the journalist, standing near the bar. He wore a tuxedo that looked rented, but his eyes were sharp. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. His team was ready. I saw Eleanor Vance, my attorney, sitting at a table near the front. She was speaking quietly to a man who looked like a waiter but stood like a federal agent. The FBI was in the room, and then there was Serena. She was radiant. She wore a gold-sequined gown that hugged her body like a second skin. Glittering under the chandeliers, she was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on the arm of the city's deputy mayor. She looked powerful. She looked untouchable. She looked like a woman who had successfully laundered $20 million and was about to frame her stepdaughter for the crime when she saw me. Her smile widened, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were cold, calculating scanners assessing a threat. "Jade!" she cried out, her voice carrying over the hum of conversation. "Everyone, look, the guest of honor has arrived." The crowd parted. I walked toward her, the sound of my heels on the marble floor cutting through the ambient noise. "You look striking," Serena said, leaning in to kiss the air next to my cheek. "Very avant-garde. I suppose the white is meant to symbolize a fresh start." "Something like that," I said. "Good," she hissed in my ear, her grip on my arm tightening like a vice. "Stick to the script. You thank me. You accept the title. You smile. If you embarrass me tonight, I will make sure the IRS audit lands on your desk, not mine. Do you understand I have the paperwork ready to prove you authorized everything?" "I am sure you do," I replied calmly. "You were always very good at paperwork." "Serena." She pulled back, looking at me with a flicker of uncertainty. My lack of fear unsettled her. But before she could analyze it, the orchestra stopped playing. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. "It is time," she said, her mask of benevolence slamming back into place. "Go sit down and look grateful." She swept up the stairs to the stage, the gold sequins catching the light. She took the microphone, basking in the applause. "Welcome, everyone," she purred. "Welcome to the Golden Heart Gala. Tonight is a celebration of family, of legacy, of the future." I stood near the side of the stage, next to the audio-visual booth. I caught the eye of the technician, a young guy in a black t-shirt. I had slipped him $500 and a flash drive 10 minutes ago. Telling him it was a surprise slideshow for my stepmother, he had plugged it in without a second thought. "For 15 years, Serena continued, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "The Ellison Future Foundation has been a beacon of hope. We have supported the most vulnerable among us. We have built homes. We have funded treatments. And we have done it all quietly, with humility." A murmur of appreciation went through the crowd. I saw my father sitting at table 1, staring at the tablecloth. "But tonight," Serena said, gesturing grandly toward me, "I want to pass the torch. I want to recognize the young woman who has been the inspiration behind so much of our work, a woman who has overcome her own challenges to stand here today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my stepdaughter and the new honorary director of the foundation, Jade Ellison." The applause was polite but enthusiastic. The spotlight swung to me. I walked up the stairs. My legs were steady. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of a gavel hitting a block. I reached the podium. Serena smiled at me, a triumphant, predatory grin. She tried to hand me the microphone, but I ignored her. I adjusted the stand. Leaning into the fixed mic, I looked out at the sea of faces, 500 witnesses. "Thank you, Serena," I said. My voice was clear, amplified through the massive speakers. It did not shake. "For that introduction, and for everything you have done." Serena nodded, stepping back slightly to give me the stage, confident that I was about to deliver my surrender. "My stepmother likes to tell stories," I began. "She tells stories about family, about charity, about sacrifice. But my favorite story of hers is one she told just a few nights ago, at my birthday party." I paused. The room went silent. Serena's smile stiffened slightly. "She stood in front of a room much like this one," I continued, locking eyes with her. "And she raised a glass, and she told the truth. She said that I was the best tax-free investment this family ever made." A nervous ripple of laughter moved through the room. People were unsure if this was a joke. "I have been thinking about that statement," I said, gripping the sides of the podium. "I am a forensic accountant. I deal in returns on investment. I deal in audits. And I realized that Serena was right. I am an investment. And tonight, I think it is time to share the dividends with all of you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. "Serena," I said, turning to look at her, "you wanted a legacy. Here it is." I pressed the button. The massive projection screen behind me, which had been displaying a loop of smiling stock photo children and the foundation's logo, flickered. The image changed. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a sound I would never forget, the sound of 500 people realizing they were witnessing a murder. But it was not a murder of flesh and blood. It was a murder of reputation. On the screen, 20 feet high, was a scanned document. It was the IRS Form 990 from 10 years ago. Highlighted in bright yellow was the section for Qualified Beneficiaries, Beneficiary Jade Ellison. Condition: severe mental retardation and incapacity. Grant amount: $200,000. "For 15 years, I narrated, my voice cold and hard as steel. "My stepmother and my father have certified to the federal government that I am mentally disabled. They claimed I cannot speak. They claimed I cannot feed myself. They claimed I require 24-hour supervision." I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a medical care invoice for $50,000 billed to the foundation. On the right, a credit card receipt from the same date, for the same amount. Vendor: Hermes Paris. Item: Birkin bag. Crocodile skin. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is the specialized medical equipment my condition apparently requires. A handbag, paid for with tax-exempt charitable donations." "Turn it off!" Serena shrieked. She lunged toward the tech booth, waving her arms. "Cut the feed! Cut it now!" The technician, terrified, scrambled to pull the plug. But I had locked the system. The presentation was running on a loop I had coded myself. "I am not done," I said, my voice booming over her screams. I clicked the remote again. A map appeared. It showed a web of lines connecting New York to the Cayman Islands. "This is the flow of funds," I explained, slipping into the professional cadence of a courtroom expert witness. "Shell companies set up by Serena Ellison. Money comes in from donors, perhaps some of you in this room, and goes out as consulting fees. It travels through 3 offshore accounts before landing back in a private holding company." I clicked again. The deed to the Hamptons estate appeared. Property name: the Jade Ellison Therapeutic Rehabilitation Center. "And this," I said, gesturing to the image of the mansion where they held their parties. "This is not a home. This is a hospital. At least, that is what they told the tax assessor to avoid paying property taxes for a decade. I am the patient. That house is my clinic." Serena was at the podium now, clawing at my arm. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, animalistic rage. "You ungrateful little bitch! Stop this! I will kill you!" I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. "You can't kill a ghost, Serena," I said into the microphone. "And you can't kill the truth." I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black for a second, then flashed up a single, final image. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer log. Time-stamped yesterday. Transfer amount $6 million. From Ellison Future Foundation to Cayman Sovereign Bank. Account holder Serena Ellison. "This is the money she stole yesterday," I said to the stunned room. "She is trying to run. She is trying to take your donations and flee the country." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. My father had his head in his hands. The deputy mayor had backed away from the stage as if it were on fire. Serena stood frozen. She stared at the screen, at the undeniable proof of her grand larceny broadcast to the entire city. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The Queen of the Upper East Side had been stripped naked in front of her court. Then, from the back of the room, the doors swung open with a heavy thud. "Federal agents," a voice boomed. Nobody move. A team of FBI agents in windbreakers poured into the room. Eleanor Vance stood up and pointed at the stage. "That is her," she said clearly. "Serena Ellison." Serena looked at the agents, then at me. Her eyes were wild. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't. I am the director. You are under arrest," I said, turning off the microphone. "Happy birthday, Serena." Two agents stormed the stage. They grabbed Serena's arms. She began to scream, a high, thin sound that shattered the last remnants of her dignity. She kicked and thrashed, her gold sequins shedding onto the stage like falling scales. Robert, do something," she shrieked. Tell them it was for the family." My father stood up slowly. An agent was already moving toward him. He looked at me across the room. There was no anger in his eyes anymore. Only a profound, crushing shame. He did not say a word. He just held out his wrists as the agent approached. I stood alone at the podium. The spotlight was still on me. The presentation on the screen behind me looped back to the beginning, to the lie that started it all. I looked out at the crowd. They were not laughing anymore. They were terrified. They were checking their phones, wondering if their names were in my files, wondering if they were next. I placed the remote control gently on the podium. It made a soft click. I walked down the stairs. The FBI agents were dragging Serena out the side door. Her screams echoed in the hallway long after she was gone. "I made you. I made all of you." I walked through the stunned crowd. The sea of tuxedos parted for me. Wider this time. They did not touch me. They stared at me with a mixture of awe and fear. I was not the victim they expected. I was the disaster they hadn't planned for. I reached the doors. Julian Cross was there, typing furiously on his phone. "It is live," he said, looking up with a grin that was all teeth. "The story is everywhere. It is trending #1 globally. The tax shelter strikes back." "Good," I said. "Where are you going?" he asked. "The police will want a statement." "I gave my statement," I said, gesturing to the screen. "Everything else is just paperwork." I pushed open the doors and stepped out into the cool night air of Fifth Avenue. The sirens were already wailing in the distance, getting closer. The flashing blue and red lights reflected off the windows of the hotel, painting the street in the colors of justice. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and rain, but to me, it smelled clean. It smelled like zero. The books were balanced. The audit was closed. I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look back at the ruin of my family. I just started walking, my white suit bright against the darkness, one step after another, into a future that finally, legally, belonged to me. The silence that followed the chaos was heavy, but it was not empty. It was the dense, suffocating quiet of a room filled with lawyers, federal agents, and the scratching of pens on legal pads. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The gala was over. The guests had fled, scattering into the New York night like cockroaches when the kitchen light turns on, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of the Ellison name. I sat in a conference room at the FBI field office in Lower Manhattan. My white suit was still crisp, though I felt a bone-deep exhaustion settling into my marrow. Eleanor Vance sat beside me, her posture as rigid as steel. Across from us, Special Agent Miller was organizing a stack of files that was now 3 inches thick. "We have enough for the indictment," Miller said, looking up from the documents. Her eyes were kind, but professional. "The wire fraud charges alone carry a minimum of 20 years, with the money laundering enhancement and the identity theft of a dependent. Serena is looking at a very long time in a very small room." "And the assets?" I asked. My voice was raspy. I had spent the last 4 hours recounting 15 years of systematic erasure. "Frozen," Miller confirmed. "We caught the Cayman transfer in transit. The bank cooperated immediately once the warrant dropped. We have seized the Hamptons estate, the Upper East Side penthouse, and the contents of the foundation's accounts. It will take months to unwind the forensic accounting, But the money is secure. And my father? I asked. I did not look at her. I looked at the reflection of the fluorescent lights on the polished mahogany table. There was a pause. Robert Ellison has been released on bail, Miller said carefully. His passport has been surrendered. He is facing charges of conspiracy and filing false returns, but, given his cooperation after the arrest and the evidence suggesting undue influence, his legal team is already pushing for a plea deal, probated sentence, heavy fines, restitution. I nodded. It was what I expected. My father was not the mastermind. He was the coward, and the law often punishes cowards less severely than it punishes villains, even if the damage they cause is exactly the same. Do you want to see him? Eleanor asked softly. He is in the waiting area. He refuses to leave until he speaks to you. I thought about the man who had sat in that chair at the gala, burying his face in his hands. I thought about the man who had offered me a blank check to sell my dignity. I thought about the man who had let his wife call me a vegetable for a tax break because he was too tired to fight for me. No, I said. The word was simple, heavy, and final. I have nothing left to say to him. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single cream-colored envelope. I had written it 2 days ago, knowing this moment would come. Give him this, I said, sliding the envelope across the table to Eleanor. Tell him it is the last communication he will ever receive from me. Eleanor took the envelope. She did not ask what was in it. She knew. Inside was a formal legal notice. It stated that I was severing all familial ties. It stated that I was resigning from any and all trusts, removing myself from his will, and relinquishing any claim to the Ellison fortune. But the most important part was the signature at the bottom. I had not signed it Jade Ellison. I had signed it Jade Russo, my mother's maiden name, the name of the woman who had loved me before the world turned into a spreadsheet of assets and liabilities, the name of the woman who had died before she could see her husband sell her daughter for a tax deduction. I am done here, I said, standing up. You are free to go, Ms. Russo, Agent Miller said. She used my new name. It sounded strange, but it sounded right. It sounded like oxygen. I walked out of the federal building and into the pre-dawn gray of the city. The air was cold and damp, smelling of rain and asphalt. I did not take a taxi. I needed to walk. I needed to feel the pavement under my feet, to remind myself that the ground was solid and that I was the one standing on it. I walked for 40 blocks. I watched the city wake up. I watched the delivery trucks rumbling down the avenues, the street sweepers cleaning away the debris of the night. New York is a city of constant reinvention. It knocks buildings down and puts new ones up. It forgets yesterday's scandals to make room for today's triumphs. I felt a kinship with the concrete and the steel. I had been knocked down. I had been demolished. And now, I was rebuilding. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I found myself standing in front of a limestone building on the Upper East Side. It was the headquarters of the Ellison Future Foundation. A construction crew was already there. The asset seizure order had been swift. They were removing the signage. I stood on the opposite corner, holding a cup of bodega coffee, and watched. A worker in a yellow vest was up on a ladder with a crowbar. He wedged the metal under the brass letter E of Ellison. With a sharp screech of metal on stone, the letter popped loose. It fell to the ground with a hollow clang. Then the L, then the other L. Bit by bit, the name was dismantled. The legacy that Serena had built on lies and theft was being stripped away, leaving only the pale, unweathered stone underneath. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel a surge of vindictive joy, the kind you see in movies where the hero stands over the defeated villain and laughs. But I felt none of that. I felt lightness. It was the physical sensation of a weight being lifted from my shoulders, a weight I had carried for 15 years without realizing how heavy it was. The weight of being the difficult stepdaughter. The weight of being the investment. The weight of waiting for a father who was never going to come save me. He was not coming, and that was okay, because I had saved myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was the managing partner at Sterling and Vane Associates, my boss. "Jade," he said when I answered, "I saw the news. It is everywhere. The Wall Street Journal, the Times, CNN." "I know," I said, watching the worker pry the word future off the wall. "We have been fielding calls all morning," he continued, his voice sounding anxious. "Clients are asking about you. They want to know if you are coming back." I took a sip of my coffee. "What did you tell them?" "I told them you are the best forensic accountant in the city," he said firmly. "I told them that if you could take down your own family's $20 million fraud ring, imagine what you could do for their compliance audits." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, small and private. "That is a good pitch." "So," he asked, "are you coming back? Or are you going to retire on the book deal everyone says you are going to get?" "I do not want a book deal," I said. "I do not want to be a celebrity victim. I want to work. I have a mortgage to pay, and unlike my stepmother, I plan to pay it with my own money." "Good," he said, sounding relieved. "We have a case file on your desk, a hedge fund in Greenwich. Looks like a Ponzi scheme. We need someone who can see through the smoke." "I will be there at 9, I said. I hung up. I tossed the empty coffee cup into a trash can. I started walking toward the subway. I was just another woman in a white coat walking to work in Manhattan. I merged into the stream of commuters. No one looked at me. No one pointed. To them, I wasn't the girl from the news. I was just a face in the crowd. I passed a newsstand on the corner of 57th Street. The headlines were screaming in bold. Black ink. Society scandal, the tax shelter takedown. Serena Ellison arrested at gala. Forensic daughter exposes millions in fraud. And there, right in the center of the front page of the New York Post, was a picture. It was the moment of the arrest. Serena was being led away in handcuffs, her mouth open in a scream, her mascara running down her face, her gold dress looking cheap and gaudy under the harsh flashbulbs. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She looked like exactly what she was, a thief who got caught. I stopped and bought the paper. The vendor handed it to me with a grunt, not looking up from his phone. I held the paper in my hands. I looked at Serena's face one last time. For years, I had been afraid of her. I had been afraid of her sharp tongue, her manipulation, her power over my father. I had let her define me. I folded the newspaper in half. Then I folded it again. I walked over to the blue recycling bin on the corner. "Goodbye, Serena," I whispered. I dropped the paper into the slot. It disappeared into the darkness of the bin, sliding in among the discarded coffee cups and yesterday's sports scores. I turned around and walked away. I did not look back. I did not check to see if it had fallen all the way down. It did not matter. She was trash, and she had been taken out. I checked my watch. It was 8:45. If I hurried, I could get to the office early. I had a new case to start, a hedge fund in Greenwich, new numbers, new lies to uncover, new puzzles to solve. I walked faster, my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm on the pavement. The sun broke through the clouds, hitting the glass skyscrapers and turning them into pillars of light. The city was moving forward, relentless and alive. And for the first time in 32 years, I was moving with it. My name is Jade Russo. I am a forensic accountant, and my books are finally balanced. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If this tale of justice and boundaries resonated with you, I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Leave a comment below, and let's share our thoughts. Please subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Let's keep supporting each other on the path to truth.